Floating Head back with the good, bad, and the unfortunate reality that is the abysmal deep desert, as well as Funcom rolled out a patch that was a complete fumble upon timing. First, let's address the patch. The patch in and of itself is really good. If you're not aware of what it is, I'll give a very brief summary of it. I'll put a link to the patch notes in the description if you want to read over it yourself, but tier 6 resources can now be collected across wider areas in the PvE part of the deep desert. Good, smart move. PvPers will be upset, but they're upset the wrong thing. It's not that... Well, I guess Sassy wants to be a part of the video now. It's not that the resources being shifted around is the problem for PvP. It's that Funcom doesn't have a proper structure for good PvP. So the real reason PvPers are getting upset is they were under the impression Deep Desert was meant to be PvP. They're changing that to better accommodate other players, and they're upset because now the one thing that they were able to do, they're not able to do as much or as easily. How you remedy that? I already went over how they need to change Deep Desert in a previous video, so if you haven't watched that, go ahead and watch that. I'll put up a thing somewhere in a link or something, I don't know. They added an element of randomization to the respawn timer of unique loot containers in the Deep Desert, so instead of being able to camp the same testing station every 45 minutes, now no one knows how long it'll take for the loot to spawn. Yet. Anyway, I'm sure people are digging into it and trying to figure it out. But before, groups would camp these testing stations and kill anyone trying to get in there. That's dumb, but I don't fault the groups because people are out there looking for PvP and there's just nothing. So they go to the easiest and most readily available thing to provide that PvP gameplay. That's not a fault of the player, that's a fault of Funcom not putting a proper structure for PvP. Plastinium tier crafting components were split up to drop based on the content location. Imperial stations, caves, shipwrecks, etc. So I'm assuming depending on the area that you're looting or the point of interest that you're looting, that means specific components will be allocated in the loot pool of that area, as opposed to everything being everywhere. The PvE loot pool in the Deep Desert has a chance of a different selection of uniques as opposed to the PvP section. Why that wasn't a thing before when they rolled out the PvE update is beyond me, but we have it now. Spawn rates, I think, is the wrong choice of words. Spawn quantity of medium fields increased from 5 to 8, and the small spice fields increased from 22 to 30, so more opportunities for spice. I, however, think they need to put medium spice drops out in the Haga Basin. Maybe like 1 or 2 every day, like 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening, because Haga Basin players want to share the spice fields anyway. Put out a spice field in there that they can actually share. Splitting up 500 spice sand between X amount of players is not viable whatsoever. They increased the delay for leaving the PvP areas from 5 seconds to 30 seconds to help mitigate border camping, which if you're someone who border camps, I get it. You know, use the systems and tools you have in place to have better leverage, but that is such a weak play, which also just kind of caters to the idea that increasing the PvE zone was probably not the best move. But again, I addressed that in another video. Go watch that if you want and see what I want them to change with Deep Desert. Allegedly, they improved stability, but I don't know about that. There is now a audio alert for PvP zone change, but now that I think back on it, yesterday, when I was playing in the Deep Desert, I did not notice an audio cue. I don't know, who knows, maybe I'll see it when I go live. Alongside with the patch being poorly timed and causing that havoc in the Deep Desert, they fix one thing and ignore others and more problems pop up. One of the biggest issues that came with this patch is people losing their loot, and more specifically and commonly their plastinium that they had farmed and their spice melange or spice sand even when they go to transition from Deep Desert to Haga Basin, myself included, and I lost a whole ass thopter. The losing of the thopter has been a thing from the get-go Funcom, please fix this. Now, alongside this patch, Funcom had quite a fumble. Players are referring to this as D6 Day, which I find hilarious, but if you're not aware, because you haven't touched the Deep Desert yet, there was an island not too far from a ring mouth location that was in a PvE zone. A bunch of people built on that island, myself included. Suddenly, there was a control point on it on Monday, and then it became a PvP zone. What did everybody wake up to? Well, whoever woke up first took it upon themselves to completely wipe everything out and take everything that they could. Everybody who woke up after the fact found their stuff gone and looted, except for my base, fortunately, but there was nothing in there to begin with, and I'm lucky, I don't know. But some people are like, oh, this is punishment for people getting too complacent in the PvE zone. That is such a cope take. Funcom has straight up said, oopsie, our bad on that matter. That was a mistake. They didn't mean for that to happen. And you know how you can avoid things like that, Funcom? Roll out the patch alongside with when you shut down servers for the Coriolis Storm. I know, crazy idea. It's almost like every other survival game with a wipe does this, so they avoid issues like this. So now you got a bunch of players that are out materials, out refineries, and time and effort, and their response is, whoops. Oh well, if there's anything that's going to kill player retention, it's going to be disrespect of their time. We've gone from 180k players down to 70k concurrent. That's a problem, Funcom. We got enough issues at hand, with the lack thereof of content with Deep Desert, and the abundance of hacking. This hacking can vary from pulling in a bunch of NPCs to you when you go into a testing station and obliterate them all, aimbotting, as well as stealing the permissions of other people's thopters, you name it, it has probably happened. Now to address the stigma. I've gotten numerous comments of people saying this is why I don't go to the Deep Desert, and understandably so. Not everybody just wants to put themselves out there to get ganked by people who aren't touching grass. Whether that be on my videos of me getting Debbie Dones downed, or my videos of me getting chased out of the desert, or some sort of crash happening and me losing my thopter because the game is not optimized by any means. Nor do I think those clips were instances of griefing. Now again, your mileage may vary. The persistence of these players is kind of lackluster compared to what I've heard from other players in other servers. People in my server give up pretty fast. They move on, but it's not so much the case in other servers. People seem to be rather persistent. So if you have a server that is riddled with griefers, comment it down below. I would love to start a new character and go find some trouble out in the Deep Desert. But moving on, people suck, and that's the unfortunate reality, among many others, of the Deep Desert. People will find a way to ruin your day in a survival game, no matter the systems in place, just for the sake of their own entertainment. So really, the best suggestion I can make is to help mitigate that is don't take anything out there that you can't afford to replace. Sucks that's the case, but you gotta work with what we got for now while Funcom figures out how to balance things. The good news is Funcom is actually taking in feedback and addressing changes to the Deep Desert accordingly, to a degree. It's baby steps, but the game's only been out a month. However, they don't do this more quickly, we're gonna lose even more of a player base than we already have. All that being said, Endgame is supposed to be group oriented, and endgame in the Deep Desert is supposed to be brutal. However, this concept is jarring for players to grasp. Why is that? Well, again, we can thank Funcom for that. The first 100 hours of the game, you can do by yourself. You don't need groups. There's rarely a moment for PvP, and now that people are getting bored, they're hanging out in the PvP sections of the Haga Basin and just border camping. Unfortunate, but you know, when you run out of things to do, you find your own fun in a sandbox, especially when they don't give us the toys. We just have sand. So there definitely needs to be a lot adjusted for the Deep Desert. This sort of behavior tends to fuel the idea that players want separated servers of PvP and PvE. I will always say this, segregating the players like that is not the solution. Creating some sort of synergy between the two playstyles is the solution. The fact that they have a testing station in the deep desert that creates waves of enemies for you to fend off, why wouldn't they have that in the beginning of the game, or each tier of progression, copper, iron, steel, aluminum, duraluminum, before you go out into the deep desert? That way you have this concept of like, oh, I need a group to do this dungeon if I want to do it, or I can come back to it and just completely wipe it out when I'm at endgame mats, or close to endgame mats. That should have been implemented from the get-go to give players an introduction and an idea like, oh, okay, this is an MMO. I should play with other people, you know? Every other MMO has that concept figured out. On top of which, there's no preparation for dogfighting. Now, they do want to push for more ground combat in the deep desert, other than the just clusterfuck that we have of Thopters bombarding missiles. Don't know what that's going to look like in their eyes, but what they could have at least done is given us some AI to fight in the Haga Basin and our Thopters. Like, maybe have some Thopters patrolling certain points of interest. Give us incentive to practice before we go out into the PvP area and risk it all because we don't know how to actually aim the fucking missiles. Because we haven't been put into a situation to use them yet. Funcom has had a lot of oversights with this game, and you could just add that to the many others on that list. So in the meantime, what can you do to enjoy endgame? Well, other than the lack thereof stuff, if you actually want to get tier 6 progression done, but you can't do it out in the deep desert on your own, find other people to play with. Sure, there's not a find group option, there's not a find a guild option, but there is a global chat, and there is voice chat. This goes for PvP players too. Negotiate. Use voice chat. Please, it's there for a reason. Or type things out before you run out there. Sure, you have to extend a little bit of trust to another player, but that goes both ways. The fact so many people want to stay reclused and by themselves in an online game that's intended to be more social is beyond me. I don't get it. I know, funny coming from the guy that's solo, but I still engage with other players because it's an MMO. That's half of the fun, the player interaction. And on that terrible disappointment, I will see you guys on the next video or when I'm live. I appreciate you watching, and I hope you have a good rest of your day, evening, or whatever it may be.